Hey watch friends, if you're familiar with the channel, you know this brand. Today we're going to be looking at the latest prototype from RZE. For a company that's known for making adventure-oriented watches, this one in my opinion is the most field and rugged styling of any of them to date. So let's go ahead and check this out. This, as I mentioned, is the prototype. This was loaned into the channel for review. The model name is going to be the Valour 38, which if you may recall, we previously looked at the Valour model, which that was a chronograph format. So as you can tell, this is very different styling overall. However, what it does have, and we'll look at this more as we go throughout, it does have that similar flow to the overall case and to that shape, which is kind of the inspiration for this, despite the fact that it's a very different style. With that being said, this one is going to be launching around early August of 2020, and the entry price, I'm going to say this right off the bat because it's impressive, $219. And we'll talk about the specs as we go throughout and why I think that's a great deal. First, we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the packaging. The packaging for this, I will note, this is just the prototype packaging. It actually is not going to be the standard packaging. This is an optional pouch that's available. The standard package has not yet been released, but that will be coming soon. With these latest pouches, RZE opted for what I think is a little more of a practical construction. The prior pouches, if you're familiar with them, are long, skinny pouches overall. They're very nice pouches, but I don't think they're as functional as something like this. This, as you can see, compared to my hand, it's a nice overall sizing. It has on the exterior for the adventure style if you want to put any of your patches or anything there, and of course, the RZE badging. You've got a zipper around the outside, and then you do have a zipper pocket on the outside as well. As you open it up, you can see it's a construction that you've seen potentially from some others. So you have up here a storage pouch on each side. Then you have these elastic slots here to where you can slide the watch down in and keep it retained here. The one thing that I will say is with this style construction, I personally am not a huge fan of the idea, especially because this doesn't have a divider or anything. I'm not a huge fan of putting two on there. I would put one on each side. Personally, I wouldn't want to opt for putting two on each side, even though it does have the slots available for it, but you can always put extra straps and those kind of things for it. But overall, I think it's a nice construction, and I think this is a good changeover from the prior packaging. For the features on this, it is sizing, as the name would denote here, is going to be coming in at a stated spec of 38 millimeters. On my calipers, I measure that at roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, coming in at 38. That's not including the crown guards. However, I think a little more true to sizing is the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock in this case because of the case shape, and that brings it in at 39.5 millimeters. So just a tick shy of the 40 millimeter mark. And as we'll see when we get this on wrist, I think it's a very versatile sizing overall, and I think it suits the case well. The bezel does step down pretty significantly. This is coming in at 36.8 millimeters. So as you can see, a nice lip there, and it does, just like the original Valour, have that overhang in between the lugs. Speaking of the lugs, this is a strap change friendly 20 millimeters, so standard sizing there. And the lug to lug is only coming in at 45 millimeters, so again, nice and versatile. And as you can see, we'll talk about this more, but it does have drilled lugs, so consistent with that strap change friendliness. As for the thickness, including the sapphire crystal, and this is a flat sapphire crystal with an inner AR, this is only coming in at 11.6 millimeters, so nice and svelte overall packaging. And that's all the more impressive because this actually houses not the thinnest of movements, though it is a great workhorse movement. This has the Seiko NH38. If you're not familiar with it, it is the venerable Seiko NH35, but without the date. So this is a no date format, as you can see from the sterile dial here, that we'll look at further. For the water resistance, despite the field watch leaning, this still has a strong water resistance rating of 100 meters or 10 atmospheres, so it's pretty much up for any task. As for the weight, this is going to be coming standard on this nylon NATO strap here, which we'll talk about that more as we go through. This is a custom strap they had produced. But the weight on this is only coming in at 57.4 grams. So while RZE is known for making light titanium watches, this one is light even by RZE standards. So very impressive there. They will also be offering this. Unfortunately, they don't have a bracelet option that we'll talk about, but they are offering an all new molded, this is a custom molded RZE FKM rubber strap here. And as we'll look at this further as well, but here's a quick glance at it. You can see branded, quick release, custom clasp or custom buckle rather. There you can see signed, and this stays with the finishing for the titanium overall. On the FKM strap rather, that's only coming in at 75.6 grams, so still extremely light. All right, so now with the basic specs out of the way, I was remiss in not mentioning, it does have the standard RZE warranty of 2 years included for this one. So you have nice coverage there, despite the fact that it has great components, so you should have longevity anyways. Let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into this overall model. First, let's look at the colors. Obviously, this is going to be available in the green that we're looking at today. Additionally, though, it's going to be featured with a blue, a gray, a yellow, and a white. And we'll look at some different corollaries for that as we go through the video, but nice options all the way around. Each of those, you will note, have a matte dial for the texture. So it is going to be, I think, very much in keeping with the overall aesthetic and style of this field-inspired watch. As far as the dial layout, you can see, of course, it does have numerals. You have your 12 all the way around, and then on the inner side, you do have the 24-hour markers as well, again, keeping with that field aesthetic. The markers are going to be printed all the way around, and then on the perimeter, it does have more traditional with your hashes as well as your triangle at the 12 o'clock position and moving around with the sneaky little RZE logo at the 6 o'clock. I like that decision. Not only does it not have any dial text, which I think keeps it from being too busy with all of the numerals that it has, but by bringing that logo down instead of the 12 o'clock like it usually is to the 6 o'clock position, I think that keeps for the overall clean aesthetic, and I think that was a great call. And then I'm sure you noticed that this does also have an accent color as you go throughout on the perimeter, which I think that kind of drab gray beige or yellow beige does fit the green coloration well on this particular version. Shifting over to the hardware, the handset is what I would call, for both the hour and minute hand, I'd call it like a creased pencils type handset. You can see a nice like Dauphin style crease down the middle there, and then it does have, of course, the breakup through the Lume with the cathedral kind of accent. As far as the second hand you might have noticed not only does it have a very legible and visible triangle out towards the end giving you your nice arrow, but additionally it does have an accent color to that, whereas the hour and minute hand have a little bit of a sheen to them, and they are kind of a somewhat reflective, somewhat brushed kind of finish and aesthetic there. You have a more flat coloration for the second hand, and in this case, it is a white second hand, which I think lends for great legibility, which is exactly what you want in a field watch. Shifting over to the Lume on this, I will say, it is not the most impressive Lume I've ever seen. The hands tend to perform very well, so all three of the hands obviously do have Lume applied. I will say the markers with being printed all the way around, first do note, I believe it is they are anticipating that they're going to remove the numeral Lume, which is something we'll talk about later on. I wish they would go ahead and keep that, but because it's printed, and this is the reason why they're considering it, it is a little bit on the dim side, and that's just a natural limitation of printing. It's consistent with other watches I've experienced as well. As far as the bezel, as we already looked at, the bezel does step down and it is set back. It has a nice aggressive cut as you go up towards the crystal, so you have a nice ledge along the side. In addition to the setback and that steep step towards the crystal, you do have a mix of finishing that's going on throughout this. So for the bezel, you're going to notice a nice radial brushing. But as we shift over to the case, and I should mention, as with all RZEs that I'm aware of, this is made of grade 2 titanium, and it is treated with their ultra hex coating. Why that's fantastic, that increases the Vickers rating to 1200, which gives you excellent scratch resistance, and I've had great wearability with all of my RZE watches, and I've had quite a few not only loaned into the channel, but additionally in my own collection. So they've seen a lot of use. Very impressed with that, like that addition. But the overall case shape, as we already talked about, this is reminiscent to the Valour, and it's almost kind of Henta-esque in the overall case shape, the way it has that flare, and it lends, despite the smaller size, to still having more dial presence than you might otherwise expect for a 38mm watch. The case shape is going to be a mix of somewhat angular. You can see here, it is kind of angular lines all through there, but then as you look from the top, it does have flowing curves to it as well. So it's a nice mix of those different. It's really tough to put this one into too much of a box, and I apologize for getting a little bit of lighting mix up here. All right, but with that being said, the case overall, I think it has a nice flow to it, and I like the fact that they played around not only on this one with the textures. As you can see here, we have blasting on the side, but additionally you can get that brushing going on the top. But the way that they played with the lines too, it does have a nice downturn, and this does keep with a nice angular downturn that keeps it in alignment with the case back as well. As we already mentioned, this does have drilled lugs, and as you can see at the 3 o'clock side, it does have integrated crown guards as well, so that keeps your crown safe. The crown itself measures in at 6.2 millimeters, and this is a screw down configuration, part of how they got that water resistance. As you can see, it does have nice aggressive milling all around that crown. I really like this design. This carries over, I believe, from the Valour as well. Very easy to grip a hold of, and I like the aesthetic look of it. The same thing is true on the perimeter of the crown. You can see that that does have a nice reversed milled RZE logo, which I think is a great accent and touch there also. Shifting over to the caseback on this is going to be a screw-in construction. It does have radial brushing all the way around, and consistent with other RZE models, it just has a nice clean text as you go through the back. To me, it's a very RZE caseback. It's what I would expect. Back to the strap. As we already talked about, this does come standard with a nice nylon NATO strap. This is a custom strap, and it does have a floating second keeper. As we already looked at, it does have the titanium, the nice blasted titanium construction for the hardware on that overall, and I think it fits the aesthetic of this watch quite well, so I think that's a good touch. But additionally, as we mentioned, this does have the optional FKM rubber strap, and I found that to be quite comfortable as well, and I've been pretty impressed with that overall. The one thing that I will knock the FKM for, and it's just a minor knock, is the quick release bars. While I was excited to see them, they are a little bit tough to grab a hold of with the spring bar nub. It just sits a little bit deep on the strap, so I'd like to see that cleaned up a bit, and maybe perhaps a little bit of a taller post included for that. But otherwise, been really impressed with the comfort of this, and that's how I've worn this the majority of the time. But while we're talking about straps, let's go ahead and check out RZE does have some excellent elastic straps as well, and these are a few that I personally have. I just actually added this blue and this green along with one of their new pens, which I will mention, if you do decide to pick up the watch or any of these accessories, I do have links down in the description. They are affiliate links, so I do appreciate if you use them. It gets me a small commission. But that being said, this pen is a collaboration with Big Eye Design, pretty slick here, and that gives you an idea of the yellow coloration. But the main thing I would look at is these straps. These are actually elastic straps. You're probably familiar with some different styles from other brands of this, but this is kind of like reminiscent of a NATO, but it does loop around and then attaches on there. But you can see these are all consistent as far as branding. This is nice though. They do have options available for any of the colors you would go with. You've got, of course, the green, the gray, and then the blue. I haven't tried these out yet. I actually just received these, but the gray I've had for a while, and you've probably seen that in past videos. So those are excellent as well, and I do encourage you check those out. So with that, let's go ahead and actually check out some different RZE models that we have, just to get an idea if you have any others in the collection. This is next to the Resolute. You can get an idea there of the overall dial presence and sizing, and then see the gray coloration. Bringing in another gray watch, this is one of their later models. This is the Fortitude, and you can see here how that compares overall. This one's even a little larger than the Resolute. And then bringing in another one, we've got the Endeavor, and then again, this is going to be the yellow coloration, so you can get kind of an idea of how that would present for the overall aesthetic for that watch. So as you can see, the sizing is kind of versatile. It is on the smaller side for the typical RZEs, but I'm glad to see them going in this direction. I think overall, and let's go ahead and actually get to the positives and some of the critiques for this. Overall, I will say first off, this is a huge value. As I said right at the outset of the video, at $219 with the specs, with the titanium, with the hardened coating, all of those kind of things, I really think this packs a lot of punch for your money, and it's tough to go wrong at that price point. Additionally, I do think this has the perfect field vibe, and I think part of that is the sizing that I started to talk about. The dial, I think it still has plenty of presence, has plenty of legibility for that, and it is unmistakably and undeniably a field style configuration for that watch overall construction. So I think that was very well done. I like the vibe this one puts off, and I think the sizing, the combination of having the somewhat chunkier case while having the somewhat smaller dial, it gives a nice hybrid whether you have a smaller wrist or a larger wrist. I think this is pretty versatile. So the sizing there is great. We already looked at and talked about the sterile dial, or the largely sterile dial, just a very subtle logo there, and then of course the numerals across the dial. But otherwise, I think that was a great call to lose the overall text for this and keep that clean aesthetic. So great job there. This styling of the watch itself, despite the fact that this is a little bit of a departure, particularly in the sizing, I will say this to me is a very typical RZE overall. It has that lightweight construction, it has the ruggedness, it has everything that you'd really want. See, the dogs are really excited about that too. It has everything that you would want out of a RZE, and it's just going to be a great everyday do-all watch. As for some of the critiques, The only real critiques that I can say for this one is the Lume, as we already talked about. I would like to see that punched up a little bit, somewhat of a limitation of the printing for the Lume, but I really want to see them keep those numerals. Whether it's weak or not, I still think that's a great accent, and I love that. The fact that it doesn't have a bracelet, I would like to see a bracelet option. It's one of the things RZE does really well, so I think that would be a good call for that, and that's an option that I would personally take advantage of if they had it. But otherwise, I think the straps they do have, it keeps the price point low, and I think it's great for the overall aesthetic and for the overall function and feel. And then finally, as I already mentioned, with the FKM option, those quick release bars, I would like to see the nub increased on that slightly. Let's go ahead and pull that in so you can see what I'm talking about. Right here, just a little bit tough to get a hold of with your finger. Not too big of a deal, but it is something that could be improved on that, on what is otherwise a really quality strap overall. So where does that leave us? At the end of the day, much like other RZE models, and actually I think even more so, this one has all of that field rugged toughness that you'd want, but the value proposition. If you were looking for a tough, everyday field style watch at $200, I really don't know of any that I think can beat this one for overall value. So there you have it. This has been hopefully a fairly in-depth look for you and giving you a better feel on whether this is one you want to snag or not. As I mentioned, I do have links down in the description. If you do decide to pick anything up, please do hit that. Helps out the channel. But most importantly, if you haven't done so already, please do smash that subscribe button. And if you like this video, please do hit that like button. Thanks for watching.